Hey everybody, it's Curse, and I wanted to share with you my progress on Path of Exile 2 and the setup that I'm running maps with right now. It's a permanent demon form, cast on crit Eye of Winter, Comet, where we just get basically max crit on Eye of Winter, and then we proc infinite comets, which if you've played Last Epoch, it's kind of like a volcanic orb, Harbinger belt proccing meteors. Very similar playstyle. However, in here it's much smoother, so let me show you why. So let's say that we wanted to run this boss map, tier 3. So you'll notice I lose a little bit of health as we go. So basically, in order to maintain permanent demon form, you need 4 ascendancy points, and so you need to get basically everything you get from the campaign for ascendancy points, and to commit them to demon form and the 10 demon flame cap. 10 demon flame is 5% of your total HP per second. So as long as you have HP recovery that exceeds that, you're fine. And you can see I don't exactly have that, but I'm very close to it. So I don't mind. It's not a major issue to just every now and then pop a health potion. But you can see the playstyle are fairly straightforward. You cast a frostbolt, or what is it called? Yeah, frostbolt, to put chilling ground for a little bit of extra damage for our Eye of Winter. And then we start spamming Eye of Winter, which procs infinite crits, infinite comets, and then they chug all of our mana away. It's the build is exceptional against bosses. That's why I clicked the boss fight. You see, it just permanently freezes everything. I've specced heavily into freeze as well. We get extra freeze. And I'm trying to monitor my mana. Usually it doesn't go that low. One of the reasons I love Permanent Demon form, especially for the campaign clear, is this this dodge roll. Look at the dodge roll. It's better than the dodge roll of any other class. Unless you spec into Blink, which takes up Spirit. So it's such a good quality of life. You actually traverse the map and the campaign overall much faster as soon as you spec into Demon form. I would not recommend going into Demon form on your first Ascendancy point, however. You're better off probably going Doggy. And then when you unlock your second Ascendancy point, that's when you want to go Demon form. But yeah, great quality of life. The class, or just rather, that spec is just much more efficient at maneuvering and safer as well, really. And that's something that is not stated in the description of the skill, is that it changes your dodge roll. So I'm not sure if it's intended or, you know, is it going to get changed. But to me, it's awesome. I love it. Just keep in mind that you don't get the stats of your weapon with demon form. Now, depending on how you view that, it can be a negative, obviously, but it can be a positive as well. As you're gearing up, and if you're a low-level character or just entering the end game, and you clearly don't have a lot of currency, or if you're behind, maybe you started late, maybe you're busy on the weekend, then you might feel like, oh, I cannot compete with everybody else on the market. Well, this class enables you to compete on the market, but making it so that you don't require a weapon. You don't have to itemize essentially 2 item slots. If you're using a two-handed, it's kind of like a 1 item slot. But yeah, it just makes it so much easier for you to itemize in that early mid-game. Anytime you can relieve pressure off of your itemization process, you want to do that. The definition of a good season starter is something that is as item independent as possible. Something that performs well regardless of what items you have, or at least is not extremely reliant on getting best in slot everywhere before it kicks in. And Demon form is exactly that. Now this setup does require some mana management, but as you progress you should be able to upgrade your gear, get more and more max mana slots. Overall, very pleasant progression throughout the campaign. Alright, now that we have the entire map cleared, I want to demonstrate to you just how fast Demon Form is. So we're going to race from this door to that door, first with Demon Form, and then in the human form, just rolling around and seeing how fast we can go. Nice and smooth, very efficient. And done. Okay, now we will go human form and we'll see how fast we can go. We'll do 2 tries. One just walking and one just rolling all the way to the same spot. Let's go. First run, walking. Yep. This is a lot slower. Okay, now human form dodge roll time. Let's go. Obviously, it's a lot slower. Now, imagine you're in a fight and you're trying to get away from opponents. And you're stuck with this slow dodge roll. The utility that Demon Form provides is just invaluable. Okay. There we have it. I'll put the times up on the screen in a sec. So I actually finished the campaign playing fire skills in Demon Form. It was basically Ember Fusillade for single target with Corpse Explosion for AoE. It's very smooth. I did the entire campaign running that way. But as you get into the endgame, in most RPGs, you're aware that maxing crit and crit damage is the way to go, and it's the way to scale into endgame. And clearly, Cold is a favorite in that. If you look at the Cold skills, all of them have higher crit. That is by intent. GGG wanted that to be the case. There's a theme to every single skill. So if you look at Elemental, you can see Flame Blast, 8%. So fire skills have the lowest crit chance. And then lightning skills are somewhere in the middle. You can see 9%, 11%, 9%. So Cold is the clear favorite. Cold is the clear winner here. Especially when you take into consideration that Eye of Winter, for some reason, has critical weakness. I'm not sure why the element with the highest crit also got the crit buff as well on it, inflict critical weakness. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe it should be under fire skills. Anyway, some of the top tier fire skills are incredibly underwhelming, I thought. Firestorm, I was very hyped for it going into the game. I wanted to make a Firestorm based build. As soon as I got to it, it was kind of garbage. The radius is way too large. You cannot scale it down enough to make it a single target winner. Flame Blast is a channeling skill. So right there, it's going to be awkward by default. Even Fireball is not that great. So the fire skills at the very end, they need to be reworked a bit, upgraded a bit. Maybe the damage numbers need to be higher. I don't know. But overall, the Cold skills have a lot going for them. And Eye of Winter, just getting it to max crit, and you can run a lot of different setups with cast on crit. I tested out Cold Snap. It's certainly viable. You just have to cast Frost Bolts every now and then so that Cold Snap has a target to proc onto. But even then, a lot of enemies get frozen with the amount of freeze improvements that we have in the passive tree. So even without Frostbolt, Cold Snap can be decently reliable. However, I do recommend Frostbolt because the Chilled Ground will empower your Eye of Winter. Gain 50% of damage as the corresponding type when passing over a ground surface. I also tried Cast on Crit for Ice Nova. That was certainly the weakest variant. Definitely Comet and Cold Snap are the best options. And really, Cold Snap consuming freeze, I don't know, man. I don't want to be unfreezing those mighty big bosses. They're frozen for like 4 or 5 seconds. Let them chill. Just DPS them down. You don't want to be using Cold Snap for that. Comet, on the other hand, great synergy. It just slaps down the bosses. Easy peasy. And that's how we landed on Eye of Winter Comet. It's just the best cast on crit setup you can imagine. Sadly, the fire skills at the very end were starting to feel a little underwhelming. I still might play around with lightning skills. However, I'm not sure how to get them to max crit, so that may be something for a future consideration. Let's quickly go over the skills as well. So Demon Form at 10 stacks of Demon Flame gives you 23 cast speeds, plus 6 to all spell skills, and 160% spell damage. I have Frostbomb just for application of exposure, but honestly I'm not sure that it is worth it. just casting it is a little bit annoying. Frostbolt, on the other hand, I do think it's worth. The chilled ground slows enemies down, so it provides some utility there. And the projectile speed helps. Triple projectile as well. And Frostbolt also synergizes with some other skills like Cold Snap. So it's nice. I like it. It buffs up the damage of Eye of Winter. Then we have Hypothermia for just boss situations to reduce their cold resistances. Eye of Winter, so this is the primary crit proc. The damage is not amazing. It's mediocre, partially because we have it spec'd for utility purposes. So 40% less cost. This is mandatory. Arcane Tempo, again mandatory because of the cast speed. And then the third gem, I've played around with a few different options. Currently I'm testing out mobility. I like mobility even though it reduces the damage of Eye of Winter. It just gives us a lot more flexibility with how we play. I can be a little bit aggro every now and then. I tried Glaciation as well. 50% more freeze buildup, so even more utility in the forms of crowd control. So that's another option instead of mobility. Or you can try and spec it into more damage. Then we have Cast on Crit. This is our main damage source. And at level 15, you can see the specs there. And if you click on this little arrow, it will tell you the energy you require to cast a single Comet. And then energy gained on crit hit with 83% extra. That's going to be about 18 energy per hit, or sorry, per crit. So you can do the math on exactly how many crits you need to proc a single Comet. Spell Echo is the best option here by far. The downside of less cast speed doesn't impact anything. So you only get a free extra Comet with more area of effect on the second Echo. So this is double damage for no downside. Then we have considered casting. Again, the less cast speed, that downside is not applied here. There are probably other options that can give you a higher moral multiplier, but this is just a trivia one, incredibly easy to execute with, and absolutely no downside, no triggers, no requirements. And then I have Overwhelming Presence as well. Now this one is tricky because you kind of have to have a little bit of strength. Otherwise you may need to spec a lower level of it. I like to run Clarity with it. If you have extra Spirit, you can consider running the Health Regen buff as well. But this is just to get that ailment threshold a little bit lower. The stun threshold is not too relevant, but the freeze threshold getting reduced is nice. Even more freezes. We have spec really heavily into utilizing the most freezes we can get. In terms of itemization, I still have my level 10 staff. I've taken this staff through the entire game. Haven't changed it once. And at this point, because we have permanent demon form, it is irrelevant, so don't even worry about it. And other than that, we just get items to max our res as much as possible. I'm still working on getting extra fire res because I am eventually going to go into unnatural resilience, and likely the next ascendancy points I'll put into altered flesh. This is a really powerful node. It diverts a bunch of cold and lightning damage into fire damage, but also physical into chaos damage. Unnatural resilience just synergizes incredibly well with that. You want to make sure you have 75 chaos res before you pick that up, preferably, as well as your fire res more than maxed out, more than 75. So likely I want to get the two around the same time. Afterwards, we have many options. Grinning Immolation is a good option. 30% more crit multi is solid. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to go for this, but certainly a good option. Loyal Hellhound is decent as well. I have heard there are issues, there are bugs between demon form and minions. Haven't really tested it out yet, but just this class in general has been a little bit janky, a little bit buggy. Now just quickly hover over the rest of my items. Basically, you want a lot of max mana, not too much max life because it makes it a little bit difficult to get enough life regen to hit that 5% threshold. You also want to get Spirit in your amulet or your chest piece, or both preferably. Spirit unlocks a lot of powerful buffs. Notice the life regen on a lot of the pieces as well. Resistances, the usual. Here are my rings. Here's the amulet. Some cast speed can be handy. These boots are pretty nice. These gloves are nice, however, I'm almost afraid of exalting them because if I get life, I might not even want that plus life in there. So on the passive tree side, we opted to go this route. The spell damage on this side is irrelevant. Crit damage as much as we can. So there are this crit nodes, these crit nodes right here, more crit nodes right here. Basically, as much crit as we can get. Then we also get the energy generation nodes over on these two spots. There are no other ones anyways. And invocated efficiency is actually a really, really useful node. Recovering 3% of mana, and even the extra damage for triggered spells. Very high value right there. And because of the proximity to these three nodes, I recommend picking them up. 40% freeze buildup, and even hits ignore elemental resistances of frozen enemies. That unlocks a lot. For example, you can consider going into climate change. Okay, that's a good name for a node. 25% of cold damage as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. That is a huge multiplier. And it's unlocked as long as the enemy is frozen, right? So there's insane synergy between these two. Not to mention you can get a little bit of extra lightning damage here. See if you can get shock, for example. So that's where I'm currently heading, is this climate change, followed by the Essence of Storm. Up here, again, a couple of high value nodes, 40% build up and 20% freeze duration for all the freeze synergies, and 1 to level of all cold skills. You notice we don't have too many nodes that actually give us just cold damage, just these two and maybe one here. So fire damage is going to be near equivalent to cold damage. The demon form as well gives you generic plus spell damage. So it's great synergy to be adding other element types onto your build here. I also opted for a bit of AoE in these 4 points. I'm not sure how I feel about them yet. I may choose to remove them at some point. And I have to say, the Int Dex starting tree has some insanely high value points. Like here, 8% skill speed, 15% mana regen, very high value for 2 points. 8% attack and cast, extra crit between these ones, 30% increased damage. Very solid nodes are all around right here for just 6 points. When it comes to crit chance math, you can see the base crit is 12%. That will get modified by another plus 10 flat crit because of critical weakness on hit. And what that means is you want to have a crit hit chance here that says 54.5%. When you get to 54.5%, that means your Eye of Winter will have 100% crit chance at 10 critical weakness stacks. Comet, especially with the additional quality, will also have max crit at that point. So when you're looking at this number, try to get 54.5% crit chance. I also need to make sure that I have the mana sustained for all the comets that drop when we get all that crit chance. Anyway, that's the build that I wanted to showcase to you. I do have a link to Mobalytics in the description of the YouTube video as well that has all the setups that I have right now, or at least what I'm thinking for the next few levels as well, to make it easier for you to copy the build on your end. But what I wanted to really highlight is this setup with permanent demon form is very versatile. You can run Ember Fusillade, you can run cast on crit Eye of Winter Comet, you can run a bunch of other cast on crits, or you can even run lightning. Despite the theme of fire around demon form, it doesn't have to commit to any element whatsoever. You have a lot of versatility. It can go chaos or physical damage as well. So I do encourage you to just try things out. Go demon form, even during the campaign. As soon as you have 4 ascendancy points, you can spec into it and just have some fun. The only issue is respec is a little pricey. I did have issues with running out of gold, respecking, like burning through probably 200-300k of gold, and that can be a little bit frustrating. I really hope GGG reduce the cost of respecking a little bit, and maybe once you get to like level 80 plus, make it very expensive. But if you want new players to join the game and try things out, even as you enter the end game, you're constantly respecking. It's just very rough to enjoy the game and play around with the amount of systems and creativity available within it if creativity is stifled through these meaningless barriers, really, to entering other builds. And I also want to say I really enjoyed the campaign. It was quite long, but it was also very challenging in a quite a good way. I had to try different things. I had to learn the different boss fights. Some parts were frustrating. For example, getting swarmed by enemies and getting stuck where you cannot get out, especially in demon form where I literally have wings and I'm flying around, I'm floating, and I have these little tiny imps full surrounding me like ghouls in back in Warcraft 3. Very unpleasant feeling to keep dying to that. So I hope there's a change coming for that. I don't know. There's not too many mobility skills that allow you to get out of dodge when it comes to that kind of playstyle. But other than that issue, the campaign was a blast. I just don't know whether or not I'll feel great about doing it over and over again for brand new characters, because it is quite long. I am still learning the end game. Just got into it recently, I feel like, and I mean, in PoE, 8 hours is recent, maybe even 20 hours is recent. It's not much experience. I hope to iterate on my build, and I hope to make it a lot better over the coming days. And I have some interesting ideas for where we can take it. Anyways, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this build guide, you feel free to like, subscribe, join me on Twitch as we try different builds and as we improve on this one. Much love, everybody. Take it easy and go. ごちそうさまでした。